Right, so we'll start again. I'll start the recording here. Great. Well, welcome everyone to part two, trauma-informed and trauma-responsive interventions. My name is Eva Gosztonyi. Most of you know me, coordinator of the Center of Excellence for Behavior Management, and I have with me my two colleagues. Do you guys want to say hello?
Good afternoon. My name is Martine Demers, also working with Eva and Catherine.
Hello, everybody. My name is Catherine Cora, and as well working with Maxine and Eva for the Center of Excellence.
Yeah, we're the group, we're the team, and today Martine and I are going to be presenting, and Catherine's going to be our backup person, and also probably if we have a moment, also look at our website, just to show people a little bit about our website. Let's see, without further ado, I think I'm going to share my screen and just get going here. So we are going to be looking today at how we respond to the children who have trauma. As I say, we're going to leave probably about 10 minutes at the end, and then we're also going to let you know that we have another session for a much more in-depth Q&A, so that if you have questions or comments, you can hang on to those for that time. We did a review last time, and I know most of you have seen it and have listened to the recording, so I'm not going to go through step by step, but just to remind ourselves again, is that we've got kids here that have a baseline physiology that is aroused, they get kindled, as a result, they have difficulty regulating, their prefrontal cortex is affected, they have trouble with their memory, and it's really because their memory, the part of their brain that is devoted to memory is kind of being on survival mode, and so can't always be able to put into long-term memory the things that were learned in the day. They have huge problems with their attention because actually their brain is preoccupied with survival, so they're paying attention to other things rather than just to our voices and just to what it is that we want to teach them. Their behavior is functional. They run away. They don't want to do work. They sometimes fight us about things. They have all different kinds of behaviors. They also have this hypervigilance, which again makes it difficult for them to stay on task. But all of these behaviors make sense in terms of the world that they have been living in, a world in which they do not feel safe. Therefore, they're not very flexible. The cortisol, the adrenaline, the norepinephrine all make the brain focus on what it is think they need to focus on, and therefore they can't kind of let things go. They can't always remember what it is that we want them to do. It's not a question of intelligence. They do know better. They can give you all the classroom rules, all the list of consequences, all sorts of things they can tell us when everything is working for them. But when they're in an emotional state, that part of their brain gets hijacked, and therefore they do things that surprise us because we know they know better, but they just can't do it in the moment. And of course, we know that as a result of the cortisol, the adrenaline, that parts of their brain are not developing as they should. And so we end up with what I've been calling the double invisible handicap, where the emotions are going up because of the kindled amygdala. The ability to reason and manage ourselves has gone down because of the prefrontal cortex and the corpus callosum that are not working. But it is an invisible handicap. These children look perfectly normal. And it's confusing to us because why are they acting in ways that seem rather irrational? And they've got so many behaviors. And as we know, the behavior is just the tip of the iceberg because what's happening inside of them is way too much emotion that's being all held in. It can't come out in terms of feelings. And so what you end up are all these behaviors that come out. The restlessness, the agitation, the aggressivity, the irritability, the foul words, the oppositionality, the resistance. These are all the behaviors that we see, but they are coming from what has happened to this child and what is going on inside of them. The biggest thing that we know happens here is that what allows a child to be able to tolerate a difficult life, things coming at them, because we all know children who've been able to tolerate it, is a strong relationship with a caring adult. But the trauma it causes that to be disconnected because, first of all, the people that are supposed to take care of the child aren't, but these children also alienate those that want to take care of them. I don't know how many people, and I know that one of my colleagues that I've worked with for many years with adolescents, Tracy, is in the audience today, and Tracy is one of the most loving, caring people that I know. But some of those children would just turn on her and be so mean towards her, and it was really hard. It was really hard to remember that this isn't coming from a place of viciousness. This is coming from a child who's scared. And so they know better, but they can do better. They can turn on us. And sometimes we do everything we know how to do and it's still not getting better. And so we can become frustrated and therefore not able to give that child that sense of safety. And of course, they have difficulty becoming who they're meant to be. They have poor social skills. Now they can't even make friends, and it causes all sorts of havoc for them. Bottom line is, though, our approach is that as Vandenheiner says here, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows and not the flower. By the way, I think that name is wrong. I think the autocorrect changed it there. So when we looked at all of this material, I came up with 7 kind of guiding principles that I thought would help us to try and orient ourselves to how we can intervene. Bottom line is, it's all about creating a safe environment for these children. We need to make sure that they feel safe with us so that their defenses can go down, their sense of hypervigilance can go down, they can start paying attention to what they need to pay attention to, and eventually be able to start healing. So the first thing is we need to make sure we keep the adult-student relationship strong. Build a team of interveners, minimize the experience of separation, compensate for the effects of trauma, this overreactivity and this immaturity, so that they can behave in the way that we need them to behave to be able to function at school, provide them with structure and predictability, offer a variety of intervention options, and ultimately, if we are able to get into a position with them, or a role with them where we can help them to start putting those defenses down and use play and emotional expression as a way of moving through the negative effects of the trauma. So let's just go through these very briefly. Keep the child-adult relationship strong. Well, the Australian Childhood Foundation just put out a document called about safety, that safety is the primary way of intervening. So I picked out a couple of quotes from them. Deep relational safety is certainly the means through which children who have suffered abuse and violence come to settle and to find the comfort and love they need to recover from its traumatic effects. So what we need to understand is that despite these chronic and difficult behaviors, we as the adults need to make sure that they don't cause a break in the relationship. And we don't take it personally. And sometimes we have to really convince ourselves because it feels very personal, but it really isn't about us. And that ultimately we need to continue to reassure the student that the adults will be there, will take care of them, even if it's been a difficult day, even if it's been a difficult week, and that we bridge to the next point of connection. And again, you might not be very happy with the child at that moment, but you give them something to hold on to till the next day. We'll see you tomorrow. We can start again tomorrow. It'll be okay. We'll do this again. And so the child then has this reassurance that the adults aren't letting go, that the adults will hold on. Now you need a team of people around you. You cannot do this by yourself. And again, what we want to work on here is that children come to feel themselves as being safe through the experience in relationship with a caring and protective adult. But as I say, we can't do this ourselves. So we need that team. So we've got to create or use an existing school team, including all of the professionals that you have at your school board, bring them all together so that you can have regular meetings to discuss these children, to figure out how best to support them, to figure out what else you can do, to share the responsibility for caring for these children. Often when I worked with Tracy and her team, and these were with adolescents, there would be 6 of us sitting around the table, and I would look around and I would say, okay, who still has a little, just a little bit left in them to give a little bit more to this kid? And I would always find somebody that said, okay, Eva, I'll reach out to that child tomorrow. I'll start the day with him. And then the others definitely came alongside. It wasn't that they didn't want to. It's just these kids make it really tough. And then we need to look around. What resources do we have in school? I remember one of the schools used the caretaker. Was able to be the person that could be a significant adult for that particular child. So we have to look around. A little bit more difficult in COVID times, but it's there. Now we need to minimize the experience of separation, and we need to examine interventions and hidden sources of separation. So I'm going to spend most of my time doing this, but I want to let you know that even though I'm going to be critical of interventions that we kind of considered tried and true, I will try and give you, or hope that I am going to give you, an alternative that you can use to manage a situation for a child, but to actually minimize this experience of separation. And so we're going to look at, and this is a short list, there are many other things we could look at, but I thought these were the essential ones to do. Timeout, consequences, choices, reflection sheets, contracts, tracking systems, agenda at the end of the day, and reward systems. And what I've done is I've done an analysis of these. I've looked at the three key factors that Dr. Neufeld tells us we need to look at when we're looking at children, and that in my experience as a school psychologist really opened up the world for me, is when I look at an intervention, the question I need to ask is, does this make sense in terms of the level of maturation that this child is at? And so any of you that know me, I've been doing a lot of work with our K4s and K5s. And one of the biggest questions, especially with our K4s, is they are just 4 years old. Are they capable of doing this? And we know from the brain development they're not. But with our children who have difficulties, like our children who've experienced trauma, complex trauma, they have maturational problems as well. And so we need to say, does this make sense in terms of their maturation? Does this particular intervention inadvertently re-trigger the sense of vulnerability? We could even say, to the point maybe even re-traumatizing the child. So we need to analyze what this looks like, what this feels like to the child, and what the effect could be if we persisted with that particular approach. And of course, the third one is, how does this particular approach reassure the child, or inadvertently not reassure the child, that we are there for them as caring adults? And so with timeouts, really, when we send a child, excuse me, when we send a child away to reflect, to think, that prefrontal cortex has got to be working. Um, and we know that these kids have difficulty with that. In terms of vulnerability, you need to be able to feel sad, but a lot of these children have shut off that particular emotion. In terms of vulnerability, when we send a child away, it increases separation alarm. And again, this is a theme that we're going to see. If we have experienced more vulnerability than we can bear, our brain starts to shut down. We call that defenses or disengagement. It comes out in the words, I don't care, so what? I don't really care about that. And when a child is sent too often into timeout, this is exactly what starts to happen. Like, I don't care. I don't even want to be with you anyway. When a child is sent away, basically the message they get, not necessarily the message we wanted to send, the message they get is, well, you can come back when you promise to behave. Well, that means the relationship is contingent on the child's good behavior, and it creates feelings of insecurity. What if I can't be good enough? There are some children that just don't believe that they can do it. So what can we do instead? Well, instead of time out, we can use time away. And some of these children can't stay in the classroom. Some of these children can't stay even in the school. But if they need to be somewhere else, what we want to be doing is sending them to someone else, a behavior technician, guidance counselor, childcare worker, anyone who is a safe attachment. Foster classrooms are another possibility, and Martin will talk a bit more about that. This because sometimes we want to send the child to a place where we're sure there is an adult. Well, sometimes another classroom teacher can take this child in, or a locale like our nurturing support centers. Bottom line is, if you've had to send a child away, make sure that you reestablish the relationship as soon as possible and let them know it's okay, I'm here tomorrow, we can start again. Consequences. Well, consequence, you have to be able to actually remember the consequence in the heat of the moment. And it's your prefrontal cortex that allows you to do that, as long as your amygdala isn't overreacting. Well, we know that's a problem for these kinds of kids. And the thing about consequences is that we have to be so careful, because we usually use a consequences that means something to a child. We take something away so that they learn, oh, this is good. And I know that there are natural consequences that can happen, but for many of the children, what it does is, if we take what they care about away, it really interferes with their own ability to develop their caring instincts. Again, you have to feel sad. If you watch children for whom consequences work, you give them a consequence, they, oh, and they feel the sadness. As soon as they have the sadness, they can reflect. But with a lot of these kids, it starts to be, I don't care. And I'm sure you've had that said to you. I don't care about the fun Friday afternoon. It's stupid anyway. Whoops, now we're into trouble. And it can negatively affect the relationships with adults because children say, well, you take away the things that I care about the most. How can I trust you? And of course, as we know, in high emotion, that capacity, that ability to use all the parts of your brain diminishes. And so even though they know the consequence, it just can't influence their behavior in the way that we think it should. What can we do? Well, it's preventative intervention. It doesn't mean we can't take things away from a child. But what we have to understand is that when we take it away, it's not to change the behavior. It's because it's in the child's best interest. So we might have to have them be in another place for recess. I might have to have them stay in the classroom until the hallways are clear. They might have to have lunch with a smaller group. These are not necessarily things that the student will be happy about. And some of the other children will look at it and say, well, he doesn't get to come out for recess. And they're happy because that kid's gotten a consequence. But what we understand is when we're doing it in the child's best interest, if they're not happy, we know they're going to not be happy. We're not going to give in to them. They can be frustrated with us, whatever, but we're not going to change our mind. We firm but kind. We don't do a lot of talking and explaining. This is just the way it is. You have to come and have lunch with Miss Mary. That's just the way it's going to be. But we want to make sure that the alternative is pleasant because might have to wait out quite a few weeks, before a little bit of maturation will happen so the child can do differently in the circumstance that they're having difficulty with. In terms of choices, again, boy, you need a good prefrontal cortex functioning. And when you've made a poor choice, it just pushes you into that sense of failure. And of course, it when somebody says to you, honey, did you make a good choice? Oh my goodness, what choice could you have made better? I know that we're trying to guide them to figure out another way to do it, but there's this huge sense of failure. And again, I think many of us as adults, especially if we've ever had to be involved with a diet, we know that how badly we feel when we ate that donut. But the thing is that when you're being guided by your emotional or alarm system, it really doesn't feel like much of a choice. Sometimes that donut goes right down before you've even had a chance to think about it, and then you feel like such a failure. So we have to be very careful because when that alarm system is engaged, when the emotional system is engaged, you just don't feel like you have a lot of control. Same with reflection sheets. Ideal about a reflection sheet, get a child to think about their behavior. Again, well functioning prefrontal cortex, these kids do really, really well. What ends up happening is the kids who need it the most get it the most, and then they have piles and piles of these sheets to fill in. They start filling them in like rote. Okay, this is what the teacher wants to hear. It doesn't actually grow them up because they're just filling in the sheet to get out of to get on with the job. And they need to feel their sadness. And if you get too many of them, it's like, I don't care. I'm just going to fill in the stupid sheet. I don't care. And they see adults as making life difficult for them, not necessarily as being on their side. Contracts, which we tend sometimes to use with slightly older children, very much the same thing. Look, if their prefrontal cortex was working well, they would be able to manage and control their behavior, but it's not. And so when they sign a contract, they're not actually growing up and becoming more responsible for their behavior. They are just actually trying to please us. When they can't please us, now it pushes their face into failure. Now, once again, they start saying, I don't care, that's a stupid contract. And now they never want to sign a contract again. They start to feel that the relationship, our caring for them, is contingent upon their good behavior. And what happens if I don't meet these conditions? It causes huge attachment alarm. What can we do instead? Of course, these children need to be guided and being able to use that prefrontal cortex to guide their behavior. So yes, we do need individual intervention, but it needs to be done much later. It needs to be done when they're calm. Um, After an incident has happened and we want to be guiding them, we need to find out if they're actually responsive to us. We try and collect them. Honey, do you have a little, do you have a moment now? I think we need to have a little talk. And if they're ready, okay, they can come and talk. And now we have a chance to guide them. If they go, I don't want to talk to you. That's stupid. It was all his fault. Woo, that's not the time you're going to be able to guide them. So we need to be able to, when we are when we have finally collected them, is to solicit their good intentions. Oh my goodness, yesterday you had such a hard time. You called your sister a really bad name. You were really mean to your friend, or whatever. I mean, probably say it in a more elegant way than that. You just had such a hard time. Is that what you wanted to do? And very often they'll say, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted him to be my friend. I didn't want to hurt his feelings." Well, let's see what we can do differently. How can you do that differently? And a lot of times our kids, they so desperately want to please us. They're going to say, I promise I'll never do that again. Well, that's not realistic. Oh my goodness, of course it's going to happen again. But how about if you just give it a try? How about if you just try it once? And then we want to help them to make it easier for them to make a good choice. Perhaps it would be a better idea if you went and spent more time with Miss Mary. Miss Mary is out on the playground. Why don't you go and be with her and help her? So give them pleasurable and alternative options that aren't going to get them into trouble. Orchestrate their schedule so they don't get into so much trouble. If they are in a situation, make sure that they know who the helpers are in that situation. I've had so many children say to the adults, but there was nobody to help me, miss. I wanted to get help, but there was nobody there. And you looked at the lunch monitors were all over the place. Oh, yes, but they didn't know the lunch monitors. They didn't trust the lunch monitors, or maybe they couldn't find the lunch monitors. I mean, one of the reasons why we encourage adults when they go out into the playground to wear something that kind of identifies them as an adult helper. But with these kinds of kids, you have to make introductions so they feel comfortable, so they feel safe going to the people that can help them. Because very often they feel really alone and then they do things to take care of themselves, which get them into more trouble. And sometimes we have to script and practice the alternate behaviors. Now let's pretend that I'm the lunch monitor here. I have my vest on. How are you going to go up to that person and talk to that person? And what are the words that you can use? And we'll let Mrs. Jones, who's the lunch monitor, most days, we'll let Mrs. Jones know that when you say to her, I need help, that she won't just say, well, honey, sort out your own problems. We'll make sure that Mrs. Jones understand, but make sure that you know the words that you need to say to be able to help her. So we're in fact doing all of the things that the choices and the contracts and the consequences do, but we're doing it in a way that's much more personalized and individualized to that child when they are ready to hear our suggestions. And of course, remember, it's going to take time. We have to be terribly patient and know that the child is going to make a lot of mistakes. They're not going to get it right. Sometimes we do tracking systems where we're trying to get the child to monitor what they do, to feel better at the end of a class that they've done the 3 behaviors that they're supposed to do. And it's again, I'm going to show you how you can use tracking systems because there are some good pieces to tracking systems. But the bottom line is that they don't actually cause growth to happen. And with the immature, they fatigue easily, and so by the end, just before lunchtime, they just can't hold it together. Just before the end of the day, they can't hold it together, and we penalize them for that immaturity. If they can't get it right, then it pushes them into failure and into disengagement. And again, once again, they feel that we love them and care for them when they behave properly. Sometimes the systems don't have any place for effort, and some of these children are trying really hard, even if they aren't succeeding. And again, it increases the attachment alarm. The other thing about these systems, and I've seen so many people do them, they just kind of give up on them after a while because they're really hard to manage. So what can we do instead? Well, the list of desired behaviors, we can put it on the desk. It's good for us to remember that for this child, we only want 3 behaviors. We don't need all 10 behaviors that we want from all of our children. So it's a good prompt. It's a good visual prompt. Again, we can at the start of the day say, which one of these do you think will be easier for you today? And they might pick 1 or 2 so that they're going to try the raising of their hand, steer them in the right direction. The other thing too is sometimes we can do a tracking system for a few days because we want to notice a pattern. Are there changes that we need to make in their environment or in their schedule? Do we need to provide extra targeted support? Do we need to create adapted routines? And what are some behaviors we need to practice with them? Um, the agenda at the end of the day, and some of you have heard me speak on this, but I just want to remind you, we have this habit at the end of the day of putting a little note on in a child's agenda, Often it's a yellow face, red face, or a green face, letting the parents know what kind of day the child has had. And sometimes it's for keeping track ourselves as well as to when there's been a whole bunch of really difficult days, so the parent understands that the child isn't doing very well. But when I sat down and analyzed this, and especially when I talked to parents of children who had this system going, and remember, most of our children get the green faces, it's only a few that keep getting the red faces, it really causes all sorts of disruption. So first of all, we have to remember, people have said to me, yes, but if we don't let the parents know the child has had a bad day, how is the parent going to help the child do better? Well, if after the month of September, the overnight fix-it routine hasn't worked, it's not going to work. This is not a kid who's going to be able to be fixed overnight as a result of a talking to. Again, it pushes a child's face into failure. It leads them to not want to care, and they basically, in fact, in a lot of these kids, they throw their agendas out the window. The agendas are gone. The pages are ripped out. They don't care because it's just too hard for them. And imagine having to bring home bad news 2, 3 times a week to your spouse. Every time you got a parking ticket, how many of you love telling your spouse about the parking ticket? None of us likes that. Makes us feel vulnerable. And that's exactly how it feels to the child. It can cause separation, attachment, and alarm. And just very, very quickly, again, just to go over it, um, when they bring that red face home, the adult opens it. Now there's a look of disappointment. The parent tries to fix it. Everybody's upset that night. The kid can't sleep. Lack of sleep causes more behavior. It's a huge problem. And now the child, they tried really hard. A lot of our children are fine until about, the last 20 minutes of the day. And here we are having to, if that's how we figure we have to do it, we're having to say, well, I guess you got an orange face today. You had a pretty good day, but it wasn't a perfect day. Well, now the adults are basically tattling on them to their parents, right? And it increases that anxiety, increases the not caring, and even the good kids. I have heard of so many good kids that get terrified on Sunday nights. And one little girl said to her mommy, but what if this is the week I don't get a green face? Oh my goodness, we never thought of it from the perspective of the child. What can we do? Some people say, well, the parent needs to know. Well, of course, if this child is having problems, have the parent come to the problem solving meeting, talk and empathize about the challenges, focus on what we all can do. You know what? Your child has had a whole bunch of really difficult days. Let's see what else we can do to make the things go better. And let the parents know we're not going to be having this reporting at the end of the day. If the behavior does need to be communicated, find another way so it's not the child who is the bearer of bad news. And again, in some of the programs that we've used, we just didn't use this at all. We had regular enough meetings with the parents about these challenging students that the parents knew the behavior wasn't magically going to go away. But we also said to them, you can't magically fix it. We're all going to be working long term to make this better. Actually, I think if a child has had a particularly difficult day, we need to send a note home, and it could be a code which says that it's a no homework night tonight, and in brackets, extra bath time, extra story time, extra cuddles. Because when any of us have had a difficult day at work, and many of us will alert our spouses to this or our families to that, and we'll say, it's been a really tough day, I'm just warning you. And what does a well-intentioned spouse do? Puts in the pizza, gets out that cup of tea or gets out that glass of wine and comforts us for our bad day. And it doesn't reinforce our bad behaviors. It makes us feel cared for and usually allows us then to reflect on the day and makes us realize that maybe we were part of the problem. When things don't go well, we need more comfort, not less. And then, sometimes with some of these parents, we need to communicate with them a lot and try and get them to help. Very quickly, reward systems. Unfortunately, children are just trying to earn to be good. It can make an unselfish behavior into a selfish behavior. What they value, what they use what they value to get them to be good, and the gains are lost. We know that. For some children, it just increases their frustration, increases their alarm, and we've had children say, "I don't care about that stupid reward system." It makes it feel like the relationship is contingent upon the performance. It can be actually insulting to the children who naturally want to behave. Um, I don't know if Martine minds if I share the story, but her
Sure.
son basically said to her, "I don't understand." She said, "The teacher's trying to buy our good behavior with chocolates. I can buy my own chocolates. If I want to be good for her, I will be good for her." And this is what it is. And kids can often feel manipulated, and the effort isn't recognized.
Mm.
There's a whole system right now of digital behavior management systems. I won't name anyone in particular, but many of you know what I'm talking about. And really, unfortunately, there's an article that's going to be available on our system where I'm going to go through where this has gone through in a lot of detail. I just want to highlight some of the points because right now the system is sold in the sense that a teacher can from their phone monitor children's behavior all the time. But the problem is that and that this can then be shared with the parents. And so, first of all, what happens is a lot of the children now are just paying attention to when the teacher's paying attention, and they're just putting a lot of effort into acting so that they'll be noticed by the children. And the question I have in my mind is that if you're focusing on behaving, can your brain really be engaged in learning? You look engaged, but are you actually learning? Is it going in? And then, what if the child's having a really difficult day? What if what about these immature, overreactive kids who can't seem to ever do what's needed to do to get that point that they're earning? What if the student is trying, but the teacher doesn't notice? What if a child is constantly receiving fewer points, and some of these systems have uh, public ways? How does that not receiving points make those children feel? The parents can see the results. Now, instead of just a happy face at the end of the day, they know exactly how many little points the child got. And one child said to his mother, and this just hit me to the core, "Mummy, I could have gotten 45 points today, but I only got 35 points. Can you still love me?" Whoa, out of the mouth of babes. Our good kids become alarmed, our adults are not feeling safe, and anxiety increases. So it's tough if you've had a reward system in your classroom. I don't throw it away, but the switch needs to be really to the relationship between the child and the adult. Children want to be good for the adults to whom they're attached. Sometimes you can just give a reward because children, just because, and our children are grateful for that. We're giving them more than what is pursued. And sometimes, once in a while, you do actually need to provide a little extra motivation to get something done, but make sure you're also recognizing effort. The next 3 points: compensating, providing structure and predictability, and offering a variety of intervention options. Martine will present.
Eva, before Martine takes over, there's 2 questions that are here. Did you want to answer them now or wait?
No, we'll do them. We'll wait.
Okay, so what we wanted to present is to say, so we have different systems and things that Eva has looked at, and to say we have concerns, and Eva has gone through that and naming that really well with the maturation and the pieces that it impacts. So we're going to flip things around and say, okay, so what can we do? And let's look at it from a whole class, and we're going to work from our targeted intervention continuum, looking at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, so that we're looking at what are some of the challenges that we have and how can we work towards it. Now, many of the things that you're going to see here are things that you are doing. There might be some where you're going, hadn't thought of that, or I've started, but could I get more bang for the buck on it? So what we're going to do is go through each of the tiers, but also to let you know that these resources that I'm going to be talking about, we have accessible, available to you on our website now. And just at the last segment is we'll take you for a quick view of the website and the pieces that you can find there. So just sit back and know that the resources are available, that we're not just talking, you're wondering a scrambling of where you can get that. So in tier 1, our big emphasis and the different pieces we really hope to see in place and that are helpful for all. So it's for all of the kids, and for our students who have experienced trauma. One of the pieces here is that these will be specifically helpful for them, but we're going to build upon through each tier. So what we're looking at is well-established structures and routines in the classrooms. And most teachers have this really down pat. They're really good with that. Having visual cues to cue the desired behaviors, because sometimes we say it, but we need visual cues to really help our kids who are the most immature. The visual cues really helps to prime their brain and encourage that next step with their good intentions, is to try and deliver what we're asking of them. Teacher greeting students after each transition. So we talk about it often in the morning, but we need to remember that it's really easy to fall out of attachment even when you have a good relationship with someone. So what we want is that for the teachers to and all of the adults that are coming into contact with students, is to really be priming that connection and greeting every time they're coming in after a transition. So there's a switch, the French teacher comes in, or the group went to gym, they're coming in from recess, from lunch monitors coming in, daycare staff is coming to pick up kids. All of that is that we're always looking at greeting kids and collecting them so that we have them in active attachment with us. Now, we're also seeing that short work periods are a lot more beneficial than very long blocks and stretched out. And this year, particularly with COVID and our brains as adults, but also all the kids, is we are benefiting from shorter work blocks, and which is also why we're doing shorter presentations. This actual presentation would have been much longer, so we've sliced it down and we've added a Q&A because we know we need more time. However, too much, too long today would not be more beneficial. So we're really looking at that. Physical movement breaks after each work period. The brain needs to have an opportunity to transfer information, learn, to be able to switch gears, to switch up the energy in the body, to be able to get back to a learning context, to be able to take in information. Now, many schools, many classrooms have opted and are going in the route of offering alternate seating options and alternate workstations. This is great. Many of our students are benefiting from this, and we'll be looking at this in the next tiers also. Individual quiet time activity. And this is something here for, again, some teachers are doing this regularly. Part of it is that, do we have a personal piece that each student has something to go to as a quiet break, that if they need to switch gears, if they're coming in and they're agitated and they need to shift down, let's say after recess, they have something that's personal to them. So that will help them to ease into the transition, but also be more beneficial of that time rather than having them roaming around. One of the things that we've also been working with and encouraging teachers for the past several years is having a designated area or a calm area within the classroom, and that this is open to all students, not just our students that are challenging, but to all students at different times. So there's a piece here where, do we have that established? How are we working that? Again, this would be an area where we have a structure and routine with how and when can it be accessed. Community projects is something that we've been bringing into classrooms quite a bit in the past couple of years, where we're encouraging that there are community projects, puzzles, things to build, things to make. They change up throughout the year. And this is something where collectively the group of students is working on together. So they can shift from an individual activity if they're needing to be on their own, but at times the community projects can really be helpful to be working conversations, but also a context of building something together that is not necessarily on an academic level. So the interventions for Tier 1, the resources that we have, and Catherine will show us on the webpage, I just brought in a few key pieces here. We have video capsules that will walk you through the setting up, the information with it, some suggestions for materials there, but the whole premise and the thinking behind it. Some of them we have in document format. The one on the top right, maximizing your classroom. I know it looks really small here, but you actually get to download the document. We also have a video capsule around that, which is really walking you through the different types and the benefits and all of those pieces. We have a whole web page on brain breaks where we have Tier 1, Tier 2, and a whole bunch of resources there that you can also download. So in Tier 2, what we're looking at is having the Tier 1 well established within your classroom. So inside the classroom, we're looking at what are the interventions that we can add outside the classroom for our Tier 2 students. These are our challenging students, the students who have a hard time being in the classroom the entire day, who need breaks, different options. So how are we growing the interventions from Tier 1 into Tier 2 so that will benefit them particular to help meet their needs? So we're looking at having daily check-ins and end-of-day recaps with a significant adult. So this is not something that is done off the cuff. It's something that is scheduled and planned, and it is with a significant adult with a particular student. So we'll have different matchups. It might be with a technician, it might be with a secretary, it might be with another person, but the key is that that significant person is doing check-ins. We also need to have a backup in case that person's not there. The designated area in the classroom Well, what we want most likely is to have scheduled times, assigned times for that student, because we know that if they use that space at a block of time, example, coming back from recess, or it can be at the kickoff in the morning, instead of having morning work, they can have it in that area, that can help really ground them to start off their day on a good note, or to help them switch gears after a transition as they return to the classroom. For some students, assigned alternate seating, having some that is reserved for them or a specific workstation will really help. I've had students where having a standing table at the back of the classroom with a stool where they could either be standing or sitting on a higher stool made the difference with how much they could pay attention, how long and how much work we actually got from them. But having them at a desk for discussion was one piece in a cluster, but having that alternate workstation that they could go to, that them choosing or being suggested to go there made the difference with how productive they were, how engaged they were. So it really also helped to reduce the inappropriate behaviors because the students' needs were really being met. Now, this is a dance, it needs to be introduced, there needs to be a way of doing it and a way of monitoring it and supporting it, because alternate seating needs to be introduced. And we need to always be very cognizant of the safety elements, because sometimes it can become a toy versus a tool, and that needs to be addressed and it needs to be worked with. But again, for some students, very beneficial, for others, less. And it just means that doesn't meet their needs. So, but the key is if we're able to offer and try, this is really beneficial. Now, some students the entire day in the classroom, they can't, they really struggle. Behaviors will happen, eruptions will happen. If we can see the patterns, like when Eva spoke of the tracking system, that you want to see patterns of what's working, what's not working, we might decide that we want to put in scheduled breaks in another location. And this will be, again, a beneficial intervention for a challenging student. We would also recommend having a personal bin with items of interest. Now, here they might have search and find books. They might have hands-on things to manipulate, different fidgets that they've made with it, with the technician or attendant, or as a classroom activity. They might have something to build, they might have something to read, but they will also have something to touch. And those things could be changed up periodically. What we would also encourage is having movement stations, movement breaks outside the classroom. So if we're doing brain breaks with the entire group, some students just need more. They have got more energy in them and they can't contain it. And I think this is where we see the immaturity of they can't contain it. So we need to give it a venue for it to come out so that it doesn't overflow into the class and cause havoc in the classroom. But for some students, having a variety of different things could really be helpful. So the resources that we have on the center on our website. Oh, sorry, I'm going to come back to scheduled breaks. So the scheduled breaks can be in another location. So we talked about it could be with a technician, but it could also be with a foster classroom. Now, I know with COVID this year, this is not something that's possible because we need to respect bubbles. However, this is something that we're in the works of finishing up another video capsule that will be a resource. And it's something that could be considered next year that you might want to look at to see how this could be feasible. The check-ins and end of day recap with a technician is again something that we mentioned. Now, for some kids, that end of day finishing up in the group is too difficult. They can't keep it together. However, if we have them leave the classroom 20 to 30 minutes earlier, we know that they're not engaged in learning then because they can't keep it together. However, if we invest time and energy in intervention, doing a recap with them, how was the day, and that this becomes a rhythm and ritual, and we help prepare, make sure they have what they need to go home and set the stage for the next day. For some students, this has made the difference with how their day goes because they know that at the end of the day, they're getting this additional support and reprieve from all the hustle and bustle. These are kids that you know that can't handle the end of the day with the locker, getting their bag ready, you know, the hallways, oh my goodness, there's always something erupting. They land, they look like a tornado. So if you have them move there before the hallways are filled, often we can help prevent. So we're looking at prevention and intervention to help prevent crises. If you don't have, if the foster classroom isn't possible and you need another alternate place, the key is always having a regular place and the student can know where they're going to. That is really the key piece, and that the person, there's somebody there knowing, anticipating, expecting that they're coming, so that it's not a surprise. And the question isn't like, oh, what happened that you're here now? It's no, it's hi, nice to see you. I was waiting for you. So that invitation, that anticipation of their coming is, it just helps them to feel safe and then to be able to share share how things went, even what didn't go well. I mean, how was the day? Was it up, medium, down? That's okay. And then we move on. How can we work on this for tomorrow, and that we're bridging to the next day? Some of our schools at Riverside, but also in different boards we are working with from the Center of Excellence, that they have set up nurturing support centers. And that's also another great venue. So that's another piece. More information on our website. I'm going to get you going there. So tier 2, some of the resources that we have there, we have created 2 video capsules on check-ins. One of them is really on how to set it up to implement and track the interventions, so that we have a sense of who's involved. And this can be on a very small scale. It could actually be on a whole school scale. So there are different resources there. And then we look at the actual check-in and the actual end of day recap. And we've created a card with some questions to help guide. Some people wanted support, so we decided to do it as a whole piece, and that we walk you through that. We have tier 2 movement stations within the school. That is another video capsule. And I mentioned personal bins. This is one that we're giving you more information. We've also have templates for You've Got Mail, which can be one of those movement breaks that a student needs outside the classroom. Again, all of these you'll see that they're all available on the website for you. In our tier 3, now we are looking at, we not only have all the interventions in the classroom, the tier 2 interventions outside the classroom. These are your top few % of students who are highly challenging, who need even more than that. And our goal here is we need the entire school team, all the adults working around the student to be involved, working aligned together. And we also need to be putting in specific interventions. So we are looking at multiple daily check-ins with significant adults. And sometimes because of how the day flows, you might need to have 2 adults that will be significant adults to this student, because morning and end of day is not enough. We need to do more check-ins with them. Some may need a personalized and adapted schedule, because our goal is to be able to keep them in school. That does not mean they're in the classroom all the time. We're going to need to be putting in scheduled intervention with significant adult, because these students, the immaturity, their difficulty to manage themselves, we need to inject more support and ongoing intervention. So we're going to be looking at the support people in the school, but we're also going to be looking at the board professionals that are coming to help your school team. Everybody needs to be on board and part of the schedule, and that this is a known piece for students. So it would look like our objective, like I mentioned, is that in school, not necessarily in class all the time, they need a personalized and adapted schedule. So some of the pieces, some of the key elements here are that it's going to require ongoing planning and revision. This is not a stagnant schedule that you can set for 3 months. This is something that you will start and readjust and plan and tweak as things unfold. When we get to a point where we have a highly challenging student like this, and we set an adapted personalized schedule, is we actually don't say when this is going to finish, because we honestly don't know. We are working at maintaining them in school, and progressively, hopefully, we can re-increase their time to be in the classroom, but we don't know how long that growth is going to take. So we need to take it very slowly, because if we go too fast, we're just going to end up with lots more behaviors, and it will tell us we need to slow down. So if we've gone too fast, the behaviors will increase, things will fall apart, and then we need to retract. So better to go slowly, because then it's more encouraging, more motivating, but it's also more engaging and wanting for the child to put forth the effort. And also for the adults, it takes a lot of time and effort when you're working with a highly challenging student. Everything that needs to be coordinated and put together is quite an intricate dance. So we're looking at selective time in the classroom, when and where they're successful. Not where we think they should like or what was really important. It's where are they successful? If it's music because they love music, they're going to music. If they can't handle math, they're not going to math. We'll do math in a different way, in another part of the schedule, but it might not be in the group. So we need to really, where they're successful, schedule time with the technician and the professionals for targeted intervention. We need to map out, what are the priorities? What are we working on? We can't work on everything at the same time. The child cannot cope. They can't manage. We need to prioritize emotional expression in interventions. When emotions are high, frustration is high, and their behaviors are all over the place, there's a turmoil, a tornado in them. We need to give it a space to express, but also in a way that will not bring consequences. Nobody will get hurt, but there needs to be a venue for it to come out so we can then inject intervention in. Our last piece is with scheduled intervention that focuses on physical release of emotions. It could be through an emotions room if you have that at your school, a lot of outdoor play, and I would strongly recommend additional phys ed classes. And if this is a student where we need to inject the support, that's okay. But if we're able to put in additional phys ed, it's part of the venue of getting the energy out and for it to flow, but also having them involved in what is more regular school than being pulled out. So here's just an example. It's just a quick visual. I know it looks tiny on your screens, but it's just to say that a visual schedule needs to be representative so a student can see it and be able to follow it. Now, this is something that this was an example where we had a student where 2 afternoons a week, he went home with mom, dad, or grandma. And then the 3 afternoons a week, he was in the nurturing support center, but he also went to gym when his group went to gym, but also when another class went to gym that we could put him in because he had a really good relationship with the phys ed teacher. So these are pieces that we work, and where's the intervention? So part of it is really, we need to tailor make. This will be particular to your school, to the resources that you have, who is available to you, and that all of the adults really need to be working their relationship with the student. The student needs to feel that this is a whole team cheering him on, not because he's bad, because he needs help to grow. It's because he needs help to grow. And we are all like different parts of a team, coaches to help him or her grow. So this is the key piece. In there, we want to give the child some sense of choice because some of this they're not going to be happy with. Like Eva said, you make decisions. And, I had a kid like try to destroy the schedule because, I'm not happy with you. And I'm like, that's okay. But I knew what he needed. And we as a team had made decisions and the adults took charge and we were taking care. So part of it was also giving him some choices of some things within the schedule when we were doing intervention. So personal choice board is another resource that we have to give ideas where the child can have a little sense of power, a little bit of a steering wheel in this whole realm of different things that are happening at school. So the resources here is there's lots. So part of it will be to go to the intervention continuum section, the emotions room. We have a whole page on brain breaks, and we have a whole page for the nurturing support center. Now I know this is huge amounts of resources, and don't expect that you're doing all this homework tonight, not at all. But the key is for you to know that there's availability, that it's there. There are many things there. And once you've looked at things and you have questions, we would be happy for you to bring those back. And that's why we've also scheduled a Q&A in a few weeks. Eva, back to you. You have to unmute your mic,
Yes,
Bill.
there. Thank you. All right. So just very quickly, because we're getting very close to the end of our time. Obviously, if we have the ability, as Martine says, to do some emotional expression with the kids, we need to be the co-regulators with them. They can't regulate themselves yet, and find dignified ways for them to get this stuff out, the emotions out, play, drama, and the emotions room, and encourage sadness and tears if they come naturally and spontaneously. I love my Calvin and Hobbes. Most of you have seen this ad nauseum, but I really think it speaks to us. I'm in a very crabby mood, so everyone just leave me alone. I hate everyone. Nobody recognizes my hints to smother me with affection. This is basically what we're getting at. So right now, under themes is where you're going to find the material on trauma. There's resources, and we'll be giving more resources. And just before I pass it over to Catherine. We've scheduled a Q&A for trauma responsive interventions on Tuesday, the 13th of April, 4 to 5 p.m. There'll be a registration form. You can submit your question at that time, and we'll figure out if another question comes up to you later on, we'll figure out a way for you to get it to us. Probably just email me. Also, don't forget, we're continuing our book study on reclaiming our students. It's going to be on the 20th of April, and we're looking at chapters 3 and 13. All right, let me stop the share.
Wonderful.
There we go. And Catherine, I don't know if you want to do look at the website, or do we want to look
I
at
can very briefly. I'm aware of the time, and I know people had a few questions, so I'll just go very quickly and show people just so they know where to go. So Eva was talking about the themes tab, and so this is the third one here. First one is the trauma and sensitivity. So when you click onto here, you will have access to the first presentation that Eva and Martin presented a few weeks ago. You've got the presentation here, you could view it here. You've got the handout here. I will add here now the second one of today. The handout is already here. And just know that we continue to add things. We add editorials, we add different infographics that are related to themes. And so this would be in terms of for the trauma. For the intervention continuum, Martin mentioned under projects. So this is where it would be. You would click here. And everything that Martin has talked about is here. You can actually download. People were saying it was very tiny. You can click here and download it as a huge page so you can see everything more in detail. We've got a recording of this session here if you want to listen into more detail than what Martin has presented. And here is all of the material that Martin has talked about. All the video capsules are here on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side are all of the downloadable documents. And so I invite you to come in and take a look, just go through the different tabs and see what's there. I added some new articles today on, so there is always new stuff that come. We've got our YouTube channel, we've got our Facebook page where we continue to share articles. So I really invite you to do so. Okay, questions, because there was a few quite relevant questions. The first one is, would you support the use of contracts for non-traumatized children?
Usually non-traumatized children don't really need a lot of contracts. I mean, a contract can be a reminder. It can be a gentleman or gentlewoman's agreement to try to solicit good intentions. But we have to be so sensitive to the fact that the child will honestly want to do better, but probably can't because of immaturity, vulnerability, and attachment alarm. So it's really not that necessary for children who are well attached to us. They will try to do better. We just need to figure out why they can't.
Second
Eva,
question.
I've often found that the contract can also cause a lot of frustration, but also in the sense of, you don't know how hard I tried. How come you say I don't get it? Like I don't get the reward or whatever it is, because we can't measure how hard they've tried on a scale of 1 to 10. Maybe that was a 15 effort, but it didn't land. It didn't rise. It didn't go to destination. So what I've seen sometimes is the disengagement after, because it's like, even if I try, I won't get it. Yeah. Like it becomes a bit like it flips on them, but it damages the relationship. And I found greater benefit in the, oh my goodness, I saw your effort. Wow, good for you. And even if it was tiny, because I'm like, oh my goodness, I saw that was hard and you tried. Oh my goodness, I saw your effort. Thank you for trying. And oh, it didn't all work out. That's okay. Sometimes it takes longer for us to get it. And there are things I try, I don't get right away. So that's okay. But how about we try again tomorrow? Are you good? You good for that? We'll try again tomorrow.
Small verbal contract, right?
But when we notice their effort, I've seen kids where like they stretch up. It's almost like they grow a half an inch, and you keep going like, oh my goodness, did you notice that effort? And they're wanting to show you, rather than if they're wondering like, did I get it? Did I not? Because then their judgment is in you. Like the evaluation is coming from you, not them feeling the pride of having tried. So
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Any suggestions on what to do when the student refuses a scheduled break or check-in? Some days they do, and other days they don't want it, but seem to need it.
Again, as Martine said before, it's that dance. It's the back and forth. And nothing's going to work perfectly. Nothing's going to fix things perfectly. So we just need to go with it, and we need to understand it isn't always going to work. And we try and find different ways, elegant ways to get them to do what they need to do. But no, there's no quick, simple recipe. It's going to always work.
I would actually encourage there is to have what are different kinds of breaks that they like, and to say, not would you like your break, or I think you need a break. What kind of break would you like today? So they're already heading in that direction. So they might not be happy that, oh, I wanted to go outside. Okay, so then I'll go and do this at the, with the technician, or I'll go to where the technician is, and okay, well, I'm going to say this is what I'm doing today. So they're not going outside, but they're choosing something else. So that sense of like, so what is it that you would like to do? So at least it's not so, and there will be some days where they're gonna, you know, like kind of yank the handbrake and want to go out, and yeah, it's not always easy. And to say it's hard to do things when you don't feel like it. Oh my goodness, I don't like those days either. Oh, you know, can we and switch it to something else? Yeah.
Somebody asks, they have a desk bicycle in the classroom and they're asking if it would be better to place it outside of the classroom or if it's okay to have it in the classroom.
In the classroom is fine. In the classroom is fine if they're using it in the classroom, and that's an option within the classroom. If a student is feeling that people are looking at them or making comments and they're being judged, or like there's something negative around it, then I would say if you feel the need to move it. But otherwise, I would work it as, you know what, sometimes I just feel like I need to move to be able to do things. I think better when I move. So I go for walks to help me process and think when I've got lots of ideas to put together. Part of it is reintroducing it also might help. Like the, you know.
Yeah. All right, one more, because I know it's 5 o'clock. When communicating with parents about providing more comfort, how would you proceed when the home and the family are in an area of trauma?
Well, again, I mean, we all know that this is the hard part, is that this families are struggling as well, and this is why the child is struggling. But in my own experience, and again, it took sometimes, I know with one woman, it took us 6 months for her to believe that we cared about her child. But you know, we do what we can. We can say, oh my goodness, you know, when we have a hard day, don't we appreciate? And you know, just do a little something extra for your child, because a lot of the parents feel this incredible responsibility to try and fix their kid overnight. To me, we've got to take that away. I mean, my sister-in-law, who is the most wonderful mother in the world, couldn't fix her little boy overnight. And he was the sweetest little guy. And if you met him now, you'd just fall in love with him. He's the greatest kid. And we have to take that pressure away from the parents. And a lot of the parents, they care and love about their children no matter what they are like. And if we just say, he needs an extra cuddle tonight, do you think you can give him an extra hug? They'll do it. Yeah. Well, our time is up. So thank you very much, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you about a month from now and answer some more questions that you might have and just help you with situations that you're struggling with. And so we just wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank
See you
you
on April 13th.